Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Dr. Mahrukh Zafar. I work as an assistant professor at Bashir College of Dentistry. I'm a Fulbright scholar with my master's in dental public health from the US. I've been working in this field for about good 7-8 years, and today the topic I'll be talking about is the secondhand smoke exposure at restaurants. We conducted a research while I was working at the Aga Khan University, and today I'll be presenting that research. But before I get into what we actually did, I would like to define what do we mean by secondhand smoke. So, secondhand smoke is basically just the smoke that a non-smoker consumes or inhales by this by the use of the tobacco products by others in their surroundings. It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be anyone around you, or just any random person in the surrounding at your workplace, maybe at a restaurant, anywhere. So that's the secondhand smoke. And according to the WHO report on the global tobacco epidemic, there's absolutely no safe level of this exposure. So you can't say that this much is okay or that much is okay. And this increases the risk of coronary heart disease by 25 to 30%, and the risk of lung cancer in non smokers by 20 to 30%. And you'll be surprised to know that globally, secondhand smoke kills 6 lakh people per year. So this is not people who are actually smoking. This is those who are getting affected by other smoking. So this is a really important issue. Um, and just looking at some of these facts, that you would realize that how much is that actually that matters. So for example, this first fact here, if you see, is that spending 2 hours in a smoky room is equal to smoking 4 cigarettes. So you would think, and that's very common. If you're sitting with a group of friends or in your office, there's someone who's smoking, you easily spend 2 hours with them. That is actually equivalent to smoking 4 cigarettes. And similarly, if you're living 24 hours with a person who's a smoker and who smokes about 1 pack of cigarette a day, so maybe your spouse or any of your family member, your parents or siblings, that's equivalent to smoking 3 cigarettes yourself. So that is a lot. And then there's this fact about shisha as well. But in the interest of time, I'm gonna keep moving ahead. Um, So, according to the Global Adult Tobacco Survey, 21.2 million people in Pakistan are exposed to tobacco smoke at the restaurants. And now this is where I get into the more of the Pakistani and relevant target population area. And because in Pakistan, we have over 23 million active tobacco use and about 1 lakh premature deaths occur annually per year, I'm talking about, due to tobacco use. And while the developed countries have actually worked a lot and have seen a decline in the tobacco use, unfortunately, LMICs like Pakistan, Bangladesh, we are experiencing an alarming rise in the consumption. And you see, the majority of the world smokers are actually residing in our LMICs. And if you go back to seeing when this all started to happen, that back in 1965, the recognition it started only in 1965, which was not very long ago. I mean, my grandparents were older, um, born much before that. But anyway, it was 1965 where the recognition of the need for a tobacco control legislation started, and then in 1979, that's when the early legislative steps were taken. Then finally in 2005, the WHO FCTC official ratification came in. But still, 2024, it's been 20 years, about 20 years, and we still see so much lack of implementation. So despite having these tobacco free policies, I don't know if you know, but in Pakistan, in public places, you're not supposed to smoke. Whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a public park or a bank or whatever, you are not supposed to smoke. We see smoke free campuses and all, but naturally it's actually everywhere in Pakistan. But because there's lack of implementation, we face all these issues. Now, this brings me to the research topic that we actually conducted in Karachi. And the purpose of the study was to assess the implementation of smoke-free laws in the Karachi restaurants. And what we did was we actually saw how many of these were compliant with the laws, how many were partially compliant, and how many were actually non-compliant. So it was an observational study, a very simple cross-section study. We did it from December 2022 to February 2023 in the East District. What we did was that we mapped all the restaurants which had an indoor dining facilities, which were about 515 in the District East. And out of those, we randomly selected 40. Now, out of these 40, 17 were low end. So you can see, like, what we mean by low end is that the cost of food was about, less than 400 PKR. Then there were 12 medium end and 11 high end restaurants. Now, what we found out was that out of those 40 restaurants that we had in our sample, 70% were either non compliant or partially compliant, which is a very sad figure, in fact. And 82% of those were low end, and 67% of the medium end were either non compliant or partially compliant. However, the good part was that none of the high end restaurants was non compliant, but yes, 55% of them were partially compliant. Again, the high end restaurants are doing better, but is that really better? Probably not, because that 55% does raise an eyebrow. Another thing that we did in this study was that we looked at some of those laws, and we did like an observational thing. So our team was present at the venue, and they looked at whether there was a no tobacco sign or not, whether there were any people smoking, was there people smoking in close proximity to other people, were there any of the employees smoking, and then were there any ashtrays or cigarette butts, because it's a cross sectional study, so it's quite possible that when we went to collect the data, there was not an active smoker right there, but the presence of a cigarette pack or a butt or an ashtray actually shows that there is active smoking in that restaurant. So the results are in front of you, and again, not so impressive. The only lowest number is that the restaurant employee was at least not smoking in majority of those. However, the no smoking signs were quite absent. There were people observed smoking, and there were a lot of ashtrays and cigarette butts observed at about 40%. Which brings me to the conclusion of our study, that this is a significant public health concern, and there's so much lack of implementation in Pakistan, with like with 70% of being either non-compliant or partially compliant to the smoke-free laws. And that brings me to the take home message. The two basically take home messages. Firstly, of course, that the just passing legislation is never sufficient. We have to enforce these laws. Without implementation, just sitting in the constitution would not make any difference. And then, secondly, what are some steps that we can take to reduce this exposure? Is that first of all, we must improve the monitoring to make sure, because until we have any surveillance, we can't control it. Secondly, there must be some penalties that should be enforced for breaking these laws. And lastly, of course, we must raise awareness about how harmful this is. Some of the facts, like I shared with you guys today, I'm sure many of you did not know. So that's, of course, a very important step in the field of public health. And that brings me to the end. Thank you so much for listening, and let's make our restaurants safe places to enjoy your food without any health hazard. Thank you so much.